Uh, Hello everyone. I am Carla Cupp. I am a game designer, developer, and publisher. And today I'm here with Raven McKenzie, who is also a game designer. Raven, tell us about yourself.
Sure. So I was born and raised in New Jersey, but I've moved around a whole lot since then. Right now I'm in Michigan. And I've been into board games for several years, but didn't get into game design until last May. It's definitely been something I've wanted to do for a while since I started playing games. Like, wouldn't it be nice to make one of these myself? But it's been one of those like, one day I will do this thing. And then finally in May, I'm like, well, if I don't do it now, am I ever really going to do this thing? And so I started doing it. I'm still doing it. I hope to still be doing it in the next couple of years. It's been fun, exhausting, exciting, and just looking forward to kind of keeping the momentum going in the future.
So, how did you actually start your first prototype?
With a lot of index cards and color pencils. And actually, this is the first notebook that I've been using for them, and it's already full of my first play test, which was with family, of course, and taking notes and reworking. I just knew I wanted to do, it was actually for this game called Macronmania. And I made on paper all of the individual macaron pieces and was kind of playing with them, assembling them. But then I wanted to, of course, with COVID and not being able to actually play with other people outside of my family in person, maybe a couple months later, I started getting it into Tabletopia. And then I realized that in the design community, most people are in Tabletop Simulator. And so I learned that system and then put it in there and started playtesting with others in the design world.
What are your thoughts between Tabletopia and Tabletop Simulator?
It's funny because now I play in Tabletop Simulator so much that whenever I do play in Tabletopia, I have to take a second to be like, okay, what are the controls again? How do I do the things that I can usually do relatively easily in TTS just because I'm in there so often? But I do think from an accessibility standpoint, particularly if you're trying to play with people who aren't designers, it's useful to have the game in Tabletopia because you might have some great friends who are willing to pay $10 to $20 to play it in tabletop sim, or just other people. But it seems to be that Tabletopia is better for that versus Tabletop Simulator.
That makes a lot of sense. And just the fact that with TTS you have to have Steam and go through all the things, whereas you just here, you've used a browser before, right?
Exactly. Just go to this website. Here's a link. Just put the link in your browser and you'll be exactly where you need to be. Definitely a bit more intuitive sometimes, easier to access.
Mm-hmm. How is it compared setting up your game? Are they about the same once you learn the how to do it?
Um, I feel in Tabletopia, you have to go through a couple more steps to get your components in there versus in Tabletop Simulator. And so I feel like the time it takes is probably, I feel like just as long, honestly, just different ways to go about it. So I wouldn't say one is easier to get your game set up in than the other one. Um, it's just a matter of, because the controls are different for inputting them into both systems, probably picking one and staying with it, or being in Tabletopia for a couple of days and then switching back to the other one for Tabletop Simulator. I couldn't imagine working in both on the daily, although I'm sure some people do. But for me, that's just switching my brain mode to one or the other takes a little bit of time. That's all. Have you set up games in both of them before, or?
I have. So I'm a big fan of TTS. Well, I wouldn't say a big fan because I hate it, but of the options that we have right
Right.
now, I like it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But then I try to do go to Tabletopia and I'm like, what am I doing and why? Like none of my
Right.
hotkeys are the same and they don't work. And how do I even like get cards in? Like
Mhm,
I
mhm.
use the TTS deck whatever the program that does it. So like I can go
Uh,
from like I update the spreadsheet, I make Nandeck output the new cards, and then I get them into TTS in like 3 minutes. Like
right.
it's super
Super
fast and I know what I'm doing. But in Tabletopia, like I tried to put in like just a simple like cards only game and I gave
uh,
up after like 2 hours and I just got somebody else to do it for me. And like I don't know, it's just I think it's like, I don't know, it's just such a different thing.
it is.
Whereas, like, I know, like, other people that have tried TTS have been like, "Oh, it's so hard to make the images and stuff," and I'm like, "Just use the deck editor, it's fine.
Right,
It's so
and just
fast."
upload it, that's it, that's all you
Yeah,
do.
you just have to know that it exists, and if you don't know it exists, then it takes 3 hours.
Right, yes. Oh my gosh.
Uh, and yeah, neither of them are, like, what I would call super accessible, but, we they
Gotta
are
work with
what we
what you got.
have.
Exactly, exactly.
Uh,
Oh, man. Um,
so, you talked about, keeping the momentum going, which is definitely, like well, especially, like, during a pandemic, like, one thing I've had, like, a lot of trouble with. So, like, how do you keep your momentum going and, like, staying excited about a design?
right. Definitely a couple of different ways have helped a lot. One being, of course, friends and family are great motivators. Just letting anyone know actually that you're doing something can usually be a push to keep yourself doing it, a little bit of accountability there. But also getting involved in the board game community in general. The tabletop mentorship program, as well as the IGGN diversity sponsorship, were really big, both when I first got started. And now I'm still in the tabletop mentorship program for a second time now, and it's hard to believe it's already more than halfway done. But just having someone that you're constantly meeting with, talking about your project, kind of making sure you're still play testing, because I think sometimes it's easy after play testing every week for, or maybe even more than once a week for months on end, you're like, maybe I'll just take a break. And then 1 week of a break turns into 2 weeks, turns into 3 weeks. And so hard for that stuff to happen when you're constantly doing things with other people. And stuff like this, talking to you, it's all kind of helps to keep game design at the forefront. Even now, as we slowly, very, very slowly, hopefully, start to return to whatever the new normal is going to be, I find that it's still been easy for me to keep game design up front because I'm doing a lot of things in it right now, and so it has to be. And I hope that once we're, 5 or 6 months down the line, 7 months down the line, whatever, that it's still holding the same place, probably in different ways. Hopefully, I'll be able to do more playtesting in person with my local group than online. Although I do still think there are a lot of um, bonuses to being able to playtest online and want to continue doing it in the future, just for having additional people who don't live in the same town as me play my game for their input. Um, but yeah, definitely the getting out of your silo as much as you can, especially now when it's so easy to stay in your silo, for me at least, has been helpful in making sure that I keep pressing forward in this space.
Oh, I definitely agree. And I also agree about where I did have like the weekly play tests and then like I got into the habit of just canceling them and I haven't done any like play testing for about a month because it's like, well, I was in the habit of play testing like 4 or 5 times a week and now I've gotten into the habit of canceling the play test 4 or 5 times a week. And I just need to like once I start the habit back up, it'll be easy, but I just have to
The
start.
starting part, that is the hardest part. And then after you've started it, it's just like clockwork, but building that habit is difficult.
Yeah. Like, just get I found, like, if I put something in the calendar, it'll probably happen. So, like, that's my trick is just to schedule everything, and then it should happen, and we'll see. Cause like, I don't
Right,
want Alexa
exactly.
screaming at me.
Oh. Are you a big fan then? Because I try to put most of my stuff onto the Google Calendar, and then sometimes phone reminders. Is that how you generally keep up on game design and other things going on?
Yeah, so I have my Google Calendar hooked up with the Alexa, so like all the anything that's gonna happen, it like does the hour warning and then it does like, oh yeah, this is starting right now. So that definitely helps. Especially since like my version of time is like completely out of it. Um but I also use Todoist a lot,
Uh,
where well, I have like a bunch of different like productivity things, but what I like about Todoist is that you can say things in like human language, like, "Oh, I want to do this every 3 days," and so
mhm,
every 3 days it'll get up on your list. And so like I have a lot of like, "Oh yeah, check in with this artist every week, check in with this person every 4 days," or whatever,
mhm.
and then like I just go through my to-do list and it makes it easy and I don't have to think.
Right.
Thinking
It's
is
nice
the
that you have
hard.
that step of figuring out what do you have to do. You have the list already, and now it's just the doing the things.
Mhm. So, do you have any, like, productivity things that you really like?
Very similar. I do to-do list. I should do them further out because normally what I'll do is just in the morning, I'll look at, what I need to do, make a list, and then I'll cross things off over the course of the day or carry some things over to the next day if need be. But definitely the calendar. And it helps that sometimes I can merge both my work calendar and my personal calendar with the game design stuff so that nothing is overlapping 9 times out of 10. Sometimes it does, and adjusting for that. And then definitely big on keeping a notebook for specific things. So that way I'm never wondering, usually, I'm never wondering where my notes are for certain things. And I can always just grab it easily whenever it's time for whether it's playtesting or working on a particular game, or brainstorming new ideas, which I would like to do more of, but particularly with the regular full-time job and then trying to do this and then having like social time with friends and whatnot or just relaxing. um, I don't get to do as much as I would like to, but definitely the different tools, digitally, physically, and Post-it notes are always fun. But yeah. Mhm.
Do you have, like, any sort of system with Post-it notes, or are they just everywhere?
No, no, yeah, they're just everywhere. Different colors for different things sometimes. And they're not necessarily things to do, but gentle reminders about just being productive in general. Like one I'm staring at right now is how are you using the time that you have? And it's like underlined at the bottom with a big question mark. So not necessarily game design centric, but just keeping my eye on how much time am I being quote unquote what I would see as being productive versus watching TV or I don't know, taking a nap. Although those are fine in moderation, but just not, all day, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I've learned to, I try to take, like, 1 nap a week now.
Okay.
Well, 'cause, like, I never well, going into the pandemic, like, I figured that my work-life balance, like, ratio was completely off because like, I had no idea how to, like, shut down when work was at home all the time.
Right.
So
Yeah.
now it's, like, just schedule in, like, 1 nap a week, and that should rejuvenate. Um, do you ever have problems like that where, like, you just don't know how to stop?
Working. Yes. Yes, for sure. And I think it comes and goes just depending on what's happening with what at the particular time. Um, I know for um, there's been a couple days last week, and there will be some days this week where I'm just going to have to push through and do probably 15 to 16 hours of regular work and then game work and then sleep and then get up the next day and do it again. Um, and I've just come to kind of accept it, but acknowledge that like it'll happen when it needs to happen because of deadlines. But then I need to make sure that when it doesn't need to happen, because there's always things you can do, whether it's in game design or in whatever your 9 to 5 is, or if you're lucky to, if they're the same thing, there's always more you can do. But this, so like, okay, it's 5 o'clock. I'm closing my laptop. It will be here tomorrow at 6 when I open it up. It's fine. And so kind of being on myself to do it because if you don't do it, no one else will do it for you. So kind of taking the reins on that more now that it's a year and some change since we got in this weird time vortex pandemic. And, it seems like maybe the summer or the fall things will be, but who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope so because I need to like leave my house every so often, like
It
see
would
other
be nice.
humans.
The simple things. I want to look at board games in my game shop and not like I haven't, and actually I just moved here in January, so I was only here for a couple months before everything shut down, and so I'd like to be able to explore the town pace, but right now I'm like, I'm just gonna wait until, I feel this like urge to go home whenever I'm out because it's not, but hopefully soon we'll be back to when you can window shop at Target and not have to worry about time and whatnot. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm so excited for that.
Mhm.
Um, so since you've been designing for about a year or so, is there anything you would recommend against doing as a new designer?
Ooh. Uh, I wouldn't say recommend against because I would say, follow whatever your creative process tells you to do and then and work within that. But I would, if at all possible, and it depends, some people work best this way, but I know for me, I started off designing a rather large and complex game that I then maybe 2 or 3 months in, I paused on and started focusing more on Macronemania. And then a few months down the line, then I added in a third game in the rotation. So just don't feel like you need to pour all of your energy into the first game design that you've ever created. Um, I think there is definitely sometimes when you focus on one thing, you can kind of move forward further than you might if you're splitting your energy and time between a couple of different designs. But you never know where those other designs will take you. And you never know where your first design will lead either. And so, if anyone is hesitant about branching off from their first idea too soon, I would say don't worry about it that much right now and just kind of do what makes sense for you as a designer. Try to get as much experience as you can designing different things so you can kind of expand your toolkit, expand your knowledge, and be able to design even greater games moving forward. I think it's really easy to hold on to one game and have it like right here for months, if not years at a time. For some people, that's worked great, and for others, like it's 7 years later and they're still like, it's not quite finished yet. I don't know what to do, how to tweak it, where to go from here. Um, and so, yeah, just kind of being open to wherever your creative process takes you, actively seeking out some of that stuff if naturally that's not something that you do. Um, and not being afraid to say, this first game, maybe it's not going to be the first one I self publish or try to pitch to a publisher. Or maybe it is, but, expectations, I feel like is another thing. Not to feel like your first game has to be the best one ever. It's okay that it's not, especially for it to not be perfect too. I am somewhat of a perfectionist. It depends on the occasion and what we're talking about in particular. But like definitely I got in my head a lot about my first design and wanting it to be, and every now and then I'll catch myself trying to tweak things that I'm like, who is really going to care about this outside of me and to what degree? So giving yourself that freedom to move around and do other things, I think in the beginning is important.
I definitely agree with that. Like it's so hard at first to know like when to stop and when it's like okay because I'm also like the perfectionist. So like you can like just work on the same game like for years and some people do. They're like, "Oh yeah, I've designed this game for 10 years." And it's like, "Whoa, that is so much time and like you could be doing a lot of things."
Yes,
Um
many, many things. Um,
so have you kind of like found what your style is as a designer? Or are you still like searching for what that is?
found what is a designer? I'm sorry.
Oh, your style? Like what kind of games you like to design or
So I'm gonna say yes and no to that. Yes, in that like I've definitely found the games that it's easiest for me to create usually are somewhat related to some of the things that I'm really passionate about outside of the game world, which I feel like makes sense. The biggest thing usually is food. I'm a very, very, very big foodie. And so whether it's in the main theme or kind of like somewhat related just in a corner of the game, usually there's food somewhere in anything that I've made. And so I think that's something that I will continue to kind of have as a main or side setting theme of the games that I work on. But I also don't want, not that I think there's anything bad about being someone who just makes games about food, but I don't want to only make games about food either. And so I have been kind of experimenting with other genres, other settings, other mechanics. I found myself initially, um, set collection, worker placement, drafting, um, and then I started working on the third game was a roll and write, trying to for whatever reason, me and Di, we have an aversion to one another. I don't know why. I think it's the luck thing, but I started playing more die games. I'm like, why did I feel this way? I don't understand, those feelings. But so I'd say kind of there will always be probably the bulk of whatever I make will have to do with food in some way, shape, or form. But and will probably be set collection, worker placement, things of that nature. Probably, I play mostly light to medium games, and so I make mostly light to medium games. Not to say I'll never make a heavy game. I think I would actually like to stretch myself and make a heavy game at some point, but I don't see myself spending energy on that anytime in the near future. So yes, but also trying to go beyond that because I don't want to paint myself into a corner and be only good for games that are X, Y, and Z. Um, do you find as a publisher that you have a certain kind of area you like to stick to or kind of wide breadth or
So, well, it's two different things because, like, as a publisher, I really like publishing games that are like light and accessible and like small box because there's so much less to deal with.
yeah.
Um, but like in the last couple years, I've actually designed a few heavy games. So
Mm-hmm.
I've actually gone and like found, well, I got one of the games signed and I'm just sitting on the other heavy game that I have. Like, well, just because like as a publisher, like I don't know like what to do with these heavy games. Like if my audience would take the heavy games or
Gotcha.
like yeah. So it's a difficulty and, like, all the work that goes into it, like, I was just so happy when I got, the one heavy game signed because then I was
Mhm.
like, "You know what? I don't have to deal with all of these
All of it.
components and, like, the fact that it weighs, like, 2 pounds, and somebody's gonna have to
Um,
deal with that fulfillment that's not me."
right.
So,
So
I'm
they
really
will.
happy about that. Um,
Mhm.
so, like, as a
Congratulations.
yeah, it was, really exciting. So, yeah, if you do wanna get games signed, like, it helps to be in the industry and to, like, know everyone because it took me, like I think it was, like, 48 hours. I just sent an email, but I've also been in the industry for, like, 5 years, so
Gotcha.
all of that goes into it, like, just, like, making all the networking and stuff work out. Um,
Right.
but that's just one, we'll see about the other one because the other one's a weird theme and who knows where it will go.
Exciting though. You never know what the future might hold for a certain design or um uh I'm slowly starting to get to the point where I'm mm, still definitely designing the games I've been working on since I started, as well as getting ready. There's been a game that I've had an idea for that I just need to turn it into a game and then get it to the table for playtesting. But starting to ever since even earlier on, there was the whole question of, well, are you going to self-publish your games or are you going to try to pitch them to publishers? And when I was first asked that, I think it was during the tabletop mentorship program, I was just like, I need to think about that now. Like, I'm not even, the game's not ready yet, but what do you mean? Um, and so it's been great to be a part of programs like that. And then just at whether it's Metatopia or Unpub, the various like board game conferences for designers that host talks about these sorts of topics and give you more insights into it so you can kind of start figuring out I'm going to have to make this decision eventually, and eventually being way before I'm actually ready to pull the trigger and do it, because at that point it's too late to try to get these things in order. Um, has it been helpful in kind of pushing me in the direction I think I'm going to go in? I say that, and I still, if someone had asked, it depends on which game. I think at this point, which route I'm going to try to go for them. Um, and also, I think it doesn't hurt to just. I'm getting ready to. I think 2 weeks from now, I'll do my first ever pitch event. That I'm definitely like. I'm nervous about it. I'm excited to like do it, get a feel for it in the virtual world, and then hopefully knock the ball out of the park in that weekend. If not, I've tried, and then but definitely at the next one. Some of these things I feel like until you do it, it's this unknown thing. But then after you do it, it should hopefully be a little bit easier the next go around, perhaps depending on the setting. But um, definitely, I feel like it's hard to unilaterally say unless you want to be a publisher and you want to publish your own games, or you have those connections. But I think I'm probably still, depending on the game, I have a decision. I think depending on reception too. That's the other thing, building up and marketing and whatnot. So I'd hate to launch a Kickstarter and like if I only have 20 followers at the beginning of the campaign, I don't think I would probably launch that. But hopefully I'd have way more than that. But yeah, and sorry for that ramble about kickstarting versus trying to get signed by a publisher, but that was definitely something I feel like before I was even thinking about those things, I just got into this wanting to make a game that I could then have on my shelf of games. Like I did this thing, I made it, but it would definitely be nice to be able to have a game that other people can enjoy in their own homes, whether it's something that I went through all of the fulfillment and logistics myself, or if I could work with a publisher and then just give them the game and maybe do development for a little while and then not have to worry about the other things. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, and well, it's an interesting choice because like it's not a choice. Like, well, as you said, like you could make a different choice for every different game, which has been one of the really exciting parts for me. Like I started off self-publishing, and then I moved to signing games, and then I started co-designing and getting games signed by other companies. So like I've done like the whole like slew of the options. And it's all really exciting and different and like well what I like is that I can learn something from every certain kind of like interaction. So
Right.
that's my goal, is just make cool things and learn along the way.
That's a good goal. The learning along the way is definitely the holds very true regardless of which method you're doing or what whether it's a program or a conference, or there's always, even if I go to a talk about the same subject, whether it's playtesting or fulfillment, I've never walked away with not one, at least one new piece of information. So it's definitely been, I try to make sure that I go to these things relatively often because there's always new things to learn, new people to meet. Oh, and I definitely, in October, I think it was, I finally joined Twitter after so many years of being like, no, 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 it's not for me, not for me. And that's definitely been another place that's been great to get to know people, see what people are playing, kind of just hang out. And now with the recent, um, uh, what's the game? It's been a couple days since I played it, which I'm so proud of myself for not having played it in so many days, but I also didn't have access to it. So it's kind of like I don't know if I can really be that proud, but like it's just so nice being part, even though everyone is so far apart. There's so many things that whether it's games that we play, board games or otherwise, or food that we make or whatnot, getting connected in that way too has been a lot of fun over the past couple of months.
Yeah, I definitely second Twitter. Like, Twitter is really how I got started in all of this. And like, well, once we go to conventions and stuff, you'll like kind of see like how cool it is. But like, I got to know a bunch of people on Twitter, and then I went to like Origins and Gen Con, and I got to meet them in person. And
Mhm.
it's been like just such an amazing experience. Like, because like most of my friends now are people that I met on Twitter, and I get to like go hang out and travel to see them, and like I stay at their houses and meet their
Um,
families, and it's so cool. It's like one of my favorite things. So
yeah.
the people that don't like Twitter are they don't have like the right community or something.
Oh. It's definitely like I remember when I first got started with it, I was still like I think my goal was like one post a week. If I can just do one post a week, then like gradually. But then I went to from once a week to like once a day. And I still find now like there's some days when I have a lot to say or I want to share a lot of things that other people are doing. And then there's some days when like I just need to disconnect and I might like some things, but not really. So I feel like finding whatever one's balance is and sticking to that and just sharing, whatever authentic parts of yourself that you can and want to share. So that finding that different people have different like, I'll put this on Twitter, I'm not gonna put this on Twitter, or I will do this and this. And so definitely after finding that, it's been easier to not spend usually too much time agonizing over something before posting it. But yeah, I'm so excited you mentioned the gaming conventions. I was going to go to my first Gen Con in 2020, and we know what happened with that. But I'm excited to whenever I know some of them are doing in person or hybrid ones for the upcoming summer fall, which I'm not sure how I feel about those, but hopefully, definitely next year, I hope to be at them and just to see all the tables, people set up their game, playing games, and just it sounds like such a great place to be for a couple of days. I'm super excited for whenever those can return to the in-person format, as well as curious to see. I think having to be in virtual for the last year and however much longer we'll be in it, there's been some upsides to being able to do things virtually. And I'm hoping that there are still virtual components to conferences or just engagement within the game community after we're back to normal. Um, but that could take place in so many different ways, shapes, and forms. So definitely curious to see what it looks like as we move forward.
Yeah, I definitely think they'll still be around because like the Discord communities are there for like every different convention. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of silly like when they have all these panels but don't like live stream them because that's so much content and things. So I really hope that they keep those up. Um, but
Same.
yeah, I'm really excited. Well, for when the conventions come back, but like you said, I don't know if I'll go to the next ones. It just seems like well, I kinda have, like, a nightmare scenario in my head right now. Well, cause like, so right now it's Gen Con a weekend, and then Origin starts, and then there's one day, and then Geek Way to the West starts, and then there's, like, a weekend, and then there's Essen, and it just seems like, right now I haven't been near other people, like, I'm in my house alone with my cats, and that's
Right.
how it's been for a year, so, like, having to run a booth or something just seems like so much stress and work. But I am really glad or really excited for when things start getting back.
Agreed.
And also for GranKhan, because I think you said that you lived in Michigan, and
Yeah.
GranKhan is there, and that was actually supposed to be my first I was supposed to be the special guest, and then it got
Oh.
canceled. So like hopefully I can talk to Brian who runs it, and he said he would
Mhm.
like probably roll
Oh,
over again. So
to
I'm
make it out.
excited for that. Um,
Awesome.
but
Fully
yeah, GrandCon, I know the guy that runs it and he's super cool. So I'm excited to try it out for the first time.
awesome. You'll have to let me know. Well, I'm gonna try to make it whenever it happens in person, and hopefully, maybe we'll be able to meet each other in person at GranKhan.
Yeah, just it can happen. Like it's gonna be so great.
Right.
Like
Awesome.
the online community now is like it's really cool because like you can meet like a lot of different people and like playtest with like I playtest on the regular with people that are from the EU or Australia or New Zealand or like actually in my state as well. So
Right.
um but like just getting to like see people and like in person and like interact and see the facial expressions and also like I can't play TTS for more than, like, 3 or 4 hours before my brain goes insane. Like,
Yeah, be a lot.
uh, yeah, it's a lot.
It's gonna be so different seeing, like, instead of just a square, you'll see a full person, and it's, "I thought you were taller than me or shorter than me." Just based on, like, arbitrary things, but, like, getting to see that stuff in person, and it's gonna be a different experience for sure.
Yeah, like, just seeing that people have, like, legs,
Right.
like, I haven't seen anyone's, like, legs or, like, bottom half for a very
Right?
long
Oh
time.
my gosh. It is
Um,
weird.
but whatever. People are gonna be way taller than me. It's just a fact. That's
Uh,
how life works. So, as you've been like progressing as a game designer, have you like done anything like with your process on getting better as a game designer? Like, do you identify areas that you need to get better, or do you just like go with the flow?
I think, I have been able to go down the design rabbit hole and stop myself quicker for certain things where I'm proposing a change or a new mechanic, and then I can play test with myself and quickly see like, no, this isn't gonna work, or yeah, this might work. I can put this version into the next one that I play test with actual people. I think that has gotten faster the more that I've been able to play test and work on the designs in general. Um, I think something that's also happened is I've been able to, through doing some other things, I've been able to make sure I started noticing a pattern with my first two games, and then games I would kind of start thinking about a little bit, where I would reach towards the same tools, the same mechanics that I had for other games. And so to get myself out of that habit, I would do more frequently either little design challenges where it's like, here's a theme, here is a mechanic you have to use, go make a game, that kind of thing, or just reading more. There's so many books out right now on game design, whether it's in the mechanics or the verbiage or just other parts of the process. And so reading on those to get some of the technical terms for what it is that I'm trying to do, to also help when I'm trying to communicate what I'm trying to do with other designers, has helped me with my process. Um, so those two things in particular have definitely improved between if I looked at myself now versus if I looked at myself back in May when I first got started.
That's really interesting, where you talk about the terminology and well, it's really important because well, I remember like different things where like maybe set collection. Or
Yes,
like
right,
yeah, like what is set collection? Like people can get like I say set collection, I mean a very specific thing, and somebody else can say set collection, I mean a very different thing. And just
right,
like you know this, you've had this conversation, but like now that we both know that, we probably don't know what the other person is thinking about set collection, like let's define this further. Like we've already identified like an area where okay, like let's talk about this, or instead of like just glossing it over and then having like confusion later on. um and just
exactly.
knowing all those things that like are or like knowing words to like convey your meanings, because like English is just so hard, like
Yeah.
it's so hard. um I wish it was different, but I mean, talking with other people and getting somebody else to know the idea that's in your head is not easy.
Very true, very true. Even when it comes down to, like, rules and trying to get them ready for other people to be able to read and then play your game. I was playing something over the weekend, and on the card it was like for every set of 1 and 2 that you have, and we're like, set 1 and 2. Talk about a pair of a 1 and 2, or is it a set of just the terminal, even like from the terminology that you use for talking about your game to others, but then how you explain it in the written form also. It can be the difference between having those two words there versus something else there. We each have our own prescribed meaning, and so being as clear as possible when you're writing rules too has been something that, thankfully, most of the rules that I've written are very much still works in progress for people to really get the gist of the game before they play, not to rely solely on without me. But once I do get to that point, that's going to be just with a fine tooth comb, making sure that everything makes sense to people. Like it's the people who are not me. Can they understand what I'm saying or not? Oh,
Oh yeah, it's so hard. Like that's one of the things I'm trying in Wicked and Wise now, where like we're playtesting and I'm like making sure like if anyone ever asks a question, I'm like, what part is the question? Like what word in this series of words is the one that led you
right.
to the question? Because like it's so hard. But like just putting it in front of people and seeing who can understand it and doing that until somebody can't, and
Right.
over and over.
Exactly. That was a thing. I think before I did my first playtest, I'd worked on a game for it was Macaron Mania for months, I think, at that point before I first got to table in front of other people, because there was that perfectionist trying to make sure it was ready before I showed to other people. But after doing it, I was like, I should have, if I had gotten into the table earlier, I could have made edits and gotten to the table again. It probably would have been so much further along had I done that instead of trying to make it perfect in my own little world. Because that feedback from other people is what really, I should say, with the caveat that it was explained to me early on. I like to think of when you're playtesting with others, it's to get insights on some of the problematic areas of the game, but still keeping it true to what you want the game to be, because it is your game, and finding that balance between this is broken versus this someone might prefer that it's this way, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. But you'll never know what any of those things are if you don't get it to the table early on. And that's definitely something I try to do whenever I'm like, this game is playable. Let's get into play testing and see what happens. So then I can kind of tweak and move forward for sure.
Yeah, I think that was also one thing that like made my productivity like with game design go so much faster, is like just get it to the table and get somebody to look at it. Like I've just come to terms with the fact that all my prototypes are going to look like trash, and that's fine, because like if everything needs to change and it looks like trash and I spent 3 minutes on it,
It's
that's
fine.
fine. It's
Hmm.
fine. But if I spent, 30 hours on it, then I'd be sad.
Right.
And then you don't get attached to anything because you made it in 3 minutes, so everything can go away and it's okay.
Exactly. Exactly. That was another, someone had mentioned your prototype should look like the stage and design process that it's in. Um, because otherwise, people will definitely have some higher expectations if you come to the table with this like beautiful, you have everything cropped and like nice Google images or whatever. But then if it doesn't play nearly to that level, like, well, they'll probably be a bit harsher in the criticism, in the input, than they would be if you came to the table with a game that is reflective of whether it's early stage or mid stage or even late stage, for sure. So I think we can't help but when we look at a game, even though we know it's in the prototype, in the playtesting phase, we still kind of we look at it to see like what does it, what are the components, what does the board look like. But I know I definitely have had, depending on what those that look better to me, I kind of like, okay, this must be almost done. But if it's not almost done, I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't, something isn't quite clicking for me. Um,
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it's sometimes really hard because like I've started just like grabbing art from different like repositories and like making prototypes that sometimes look like they're like done, and it's like no, I haven't play tested this yet. And then you get like really harsh criticism and it's like,
Right.
whoa,
Yeah.
first play test, I'm sorry, it wasn't perfect.
Uh,
Um, but yeah, like making it, I definitely agree that the closer it looks like to the actual stage, the better because then people always make assumptions.
right.
And it's just identifying those assumptions and making sure you know what the other assumptions made are.
Right. Exactly.
Um, so you mentioned that there's game design books that you like to read. Are there any like ones in particular that you'd recommend?
So there are a couple, and I will admit that I like to read the same author, and so I kind of like go through their works and then I'll look in the references to see who they cited, and then I'll slowly start making my way into other territory. But the first author that I started reading, he wrote Building Blocks of Tabletop Game Design, Joffrey Engelstein. That was my first, and I found it to be a really easy, like just the way that it was set up, the way that the different mechanics were explained and the chapters were written out. I found it to be intuitive to read like a couple chapters in a day, kind of put it down, do some game design stuff, pick it back up, read a couple chapters. Um, I know that recently he came out with a new book. I believe it's called Game Tech, I want to say, that I haven't had the chance to read it just yet. Um, but that's been one of the authors that I've really enjoyed reading. There are many, many more that I'm slowly making my way into, but that was my first book that I definitely um, will probably continue referencing as I keep designing additional games.
Is there any other references you like to use, like podcasts or blogs or anything like that?
Yes, yes. Many others, and I did want to say actually the newest one is game production about prototyping that he just came out with. But other sources, so definitely uh, many podcasts from the Board Game Design Lab to there are honestly. I forgot. I listen to so many of them that I just have like I subscribe and the updates come in and it just comes on while I'm working. I feel like that's the one that I listen to most often just because I have so many different hosts and I like hearing from different people about different things. So otherwise, if it's the same person all the time, I kind of get a little, it just kind of morphs into the same monologue and then I'm not picking up as much as I should be. So that's why I particularly like that one just because there's so many different hosts on the show. And I feel like the topics are varied enough that I can I'm still paying attention as I listen and do whether it's work or game design myself. Are there any that you're particularly a fan of?
I definitely used to listen to a lot of game or the board game design lab. Breaking into board games was another one that I liked a lot. But like lately I haven't been driving, so I just don't listen to podcasts anymore, I guess. I'll get back into that when I like travel again. So
Uh, it definitely is with not having the commute anymore, being more intentional about like I can usually it depends on what I'm doing for work. Sometimes I find I can listen and still get stuff out of it and still also be productive. But other times it's definitely not as easy as when you're driving and you just have it on the background. But I have also been able to listen to um, building the game. And the other one was there was a I think the game design roundtable was the other one that I listen to pretty often. Um, and yeah, if walking also, especially now that the weather is getting nicer, I find myself going on like 5 mile walks every now and then just to kind of get out of my four walls and experience the world a little bit. And so it's nice to either listen to those and still feel like I'm being productive, even though of course being exercising is productive, but like in more ways than one. So those have been helpful for doing. Then hopefully as it continues to get warmer, more of those will be able to listen to as well.
mhm. Yeah, hopefully, like, everything will just get nicer and we'll just all enjoy life again.
Fingers crossed. Uh, outside of that,
Oh, is there anything else that you're passionate about in board game design or publishing?
um, I'd say as far as like in my process or something that I'm happy to have done recently, or
Anything.
um, I'd say I think when I first got into board game design, even though I wasn't thinking about the publishing piece, I did have a preconceived notion of when I'd be finished with the game. And so letting that go, but still being conscious of how much time is passing and how much I would like to get done has been helpful for me. Because especially now as systems are backed up and factories are, they can take orders, but I'm seeing some Kickstarters with fulfillment in like 2023 at this point, which I was just like, I know. I was like, it's still barely into 2021 and in 2023 fulfillment. What do you mean? But giving yourself some grace now as systems are still really wonky. Like, of course, I still am definitely one of my goals has been to, like I said, when I first got into it, I just wanted to have a game for me on my shelf. And so I'm making sure that this year, at least one, if not two of my designs, one I should have by this summer, a physical prototype made and some nice artwork. And the other one, I'd like by the end of this year, if not then early next year. But I am also going to come to the decision for the smaller one, Macronemania, if I do want to go the publisher route or if I'm going to potentially next year kickstart it. Um, but I had initially had these timelines much sooner, which I think was also a little unrealistic on my part getting into design and just thinking that I'd be through the design process in a matter of 2 months, which happens miraculously for some people, but definitely for me for my first couple ones, not so much. So just being flexible and fluid with those have definitely helped me feel better about my process. Um, and not, if you're playtesting your design in a group and someone who's playtesting decides that they're going to kickstart in 3 months doesn't mean you also have to kickstart your game that soon. Each game has its own process. You have your own amount of time that you can devote to this sort of thing. And so I think being cognizant of that and then using that information to set my deadlines and not feeling pressured to have something published within the first year that I've started design or even potentially the first two, um, it would be nice. I'm not saying I'm not going to seek out those opportunities, but I'm definitely not going to stake my worth as a designer on accomplishing those things in that time frame or not. So I hope that others who are getting into game design, whether just at the beginning or they're approaching the end of year one, moving into year two or two to three, take it at whatever pace makes sense to you for whatever you want to accomplish out of it. Certainly pound the pavement when you can, but last year has been crazy. This year will be crazy. Next year will probably also be somewhat crazy. So, also give yourself a little grace.
Yeah. I definitely like that because, like, if you don't give yourself, like, a little leeway, like, you're not gonna be productive and you're just gonna get angry at yourself, and that's not gonna make the timeline go better.
Exactly. If anything, that will make it expand out because then you're gonna be like maybe for weeks or if not a month or more, you're gonna be like, you know what? I want to take a break because this isn't going where I want it to go. Which every now and then I think a break from it is fine, especially if you find yourself just too close to it and not able to identify what you need to change or what you want to do with it. But the more often those things happen, the longer it will take, and then definitely you won't be in the place you would have hoped to be a couple months from now. So do whatever feels right for you at that moment with that game, whether it's putting that game on the shelf and moving to a different design. And that was one of the reasons why, with Macro and Mini particularly, when I was working on a bigger game, there was just so many different move and compete moving components and pieces that I was like, I need to work on something smaller and lighter to just give my brain a break from some of these bigger issues that I will tackle, but just not right now. And that definitely helped being able to switch to something lighter than moving back and forth between the two as I felt able to work on the different projects.
Mhm. Well, that is definitely great advice. Like I always find like if I have too many issues, just working on something else for a little bit or taking a break or something like, and then like I'll find the solution. Like I'll wake up in the middle of the night and have it, and then it's just because you have to give your brain time.
Yeah,
Can't force it. Well,
exactly.
I mean, some people can, but not everyone.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
So,
Um,
if people want to find you more after this, where should they go?
right now, definitely Twitter. I can be found at underscore Raven McKenzie. That is me. Underscore is important because without an underscore, it's a banned account. So underscore Raven McKenzie. Um, and yeah, feel free. You can ask me anything there. Follow. Oh, and I also, so they can also find me. I'm a part of the there's a group of women who banded together to we have a Twitch stream, I'd say about every other week now. It's a girls drinking wine and playing games. It's an evening relaxing happy hour type where we talk to game designers and we play their games for a couple hours. And we're also on Twitter at girls wine and games, I believe is our uh, tag on Twitter. But if you type in girls and wine, you will find it.
That is amazing. I'm so glad that that exists.
It's a lot of fun, both in the production and the actual games. Uh,
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on. Any last thoughts?
just thank you for having me, Carla. This was fun to chat, and I look forward to whether hopefully we can meet in person at GranKhan whenever that is going to take place again. But I'm sure I will see you in the virtual design space very soon. Thanks for having me on the show.
Mhm. Thanks so much for being here and have a great weekend, everyone.
You too. Bye, everyone.